Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov, get any updates to our forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we may have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to that means as well. And you can follow us both on Facebook and on Twitter. Taking a look now, we have quite a few warnings out for the state. We'll start off in areas around the Alaska Range. First one in the Susitna Valley is a winter weather advisory for snow. That will be out until 6 a.m. tomorrow. Then all these three red ones here from the Alaska Range are high wind warnings, and those extend into the upper Kuskokwim Valley. And those are all going to be out until 6 p.m. tomorrow, with the exception of the upper Kuskokwim Valley. That one is going to expire tonight at 9 p.m. And then we have near Delta Junction a wind advisory, and that is going to expire here at the top of the hour. Moving up to the northern part of the state, we have quite a few up here as well. Starting with the southern ones, we have two winter weather advisories for snow, and that's extending the southeast part of the Brooks Range and the upper Koyukuk. And those are going to start this evening and expire tomorrow evening. And then we have another winter storm warning for snow in the northeastern parts of the Brooks Range, and that's going to be similar starting in the evening hours and going into tomorrow. Then all along the Arctic coastline we have winter storm warnings for blowing snow, and some of those conditions around those times, the stronger winds could drop down to blizzard-like conditions, so be mindful of that. And again, for any of the times for any of these warnings or advisories, please check the website, especially if you're in one of these locations, to get the specific details for your location. Moving on now, taking a look at our satellite imagery, we'll start off way to the east. We have a low that has moved out into Canada there that's bringing up a lot of warmer air from the south, bringing some moisture with it as well, and seeing some precipitation around the southeast part of the state because of that. As we look a little bit further to the west, we have a low that's moving up and going to park right around the Barrens right now, and that's bringing that southerly push with those two lows, bringing up a lot of moisture throughout the area, a lot of rain along the coastline, and changing over to snow as we get further inland, but a lot of cloud cover throughout much of the state because of these low pressure systems. As we move further off to the west, we have another low that is moving out through the Bering Sea right now, starting to die out, but bringing in southerly flow to the southwest part of the state too, seeing some rain and snow in these locations as well. And then way out to the west, we have another frontal system moving in that's bringing a lot of southerly flow to the western Aleutian Islands, and you can really see the front there, and we're starting to see some snow, and that's going to transition over to rain with the warmer air from the south. We can see that as we look for the remainder of today. Snow out ahead of this thing, and then warmer air coming in to transition that over to a rain and snow mix. And as we move further off to the east, we have rain throughout the eastern Aleutian Islands and the Alaska Peninsula. That's going to extend into the Bristol Bay area and parts of the lower Kuskokwim Valley. And then we have that transitioning to snow with the colder temperatures as we get more inland, and then all the way to snow as we make it into the Kotzebue Sound and parts of the interior. Then up along the Arctic coast, we have stronger winds mixing with that snow for those blowing snow conditions that we were talking about. And then down along the eastern part of the state, snow all the way down into the Alaska Range, and then down in the Susitna Valley, going to see that snow there, with the rain along the northern Gulf Coast extending down towards Kodiak with the warmer air coming up from the south there, and then a rain and snow mix along the eastern parts of the Gulf Coast, pushing its way into the southeast, starting to make its way further to more inland locations. As we move into tonight, the rain and snow mix is going to be further to the north, but then along the Gulf coastline, we are going to see primarily rain there. High pressure starting to move in from the south, but still going to see continue showers all the way along the North Gulf Coast. Primarily rain, but mixing with snow in Kenai Peninsula as we get further to the north. Copper River Basin and around the Valdez area, you're going to see snow there, and that's going to continue up all the way along the east part of the state into the Brooks Range, where we become all snow there with the blowing snow conditions along the Arctic coast. But for the western part of the interior and along the west coast of the state, a rain and snow mix expected. Primarily snow for the more northern and interior locations, but there is a possibility that some of that could be mixed with freezing rain, so be mindful of that. As we get along the YK Delta Bristol Bay areas, a rain and snow mix expected there. Lighter showers expected out over the Bering Sea, eastern Aleutian Islands, and Alaska Peninsula. Then we can watch our front slowly tracking to the east, making its way closer towards the central Aleutian Islands for tonight. As we move into tomorrow, we are going to see some of that rain making it to the central Aleutian Islands now with some lighter showers behind that frontal system. Out over the Bering Sea, some rain and snow there as well, and then in the Alaska Peninsula, becoming more snow as we get into the southwest part of the state, and that snow is going to continue as we move further up to the north around the Norton Sound area. As we get to the Kotzebue Sound area, extending out to places around Galena, we are going to see a continued chance for some light freezing rain in there, and that's going to be for right around the Tin City area as well. As we push further to the north, though, transitioning back to snow and continuing to see the blowing snow conditions all along the Arctic coastline. As we drop down along the eastern part of the state in the upper Yukon Valley, chance of some light freezing rain there as well. But as we move further to the south into the Alaska Range and eventually down into the Copper River Basin, and just expecting to see some snow out there. Rain and snow mix throughout the Cook Inlet and Kenai Peninsula areas. Cordova expected to stay rain, and then rain throughout the southeast on Wednesday. So we move into the new year on Thursday. We do have the southerly flow bringing up a lot of rain throughout the southeast now, extending all the way along the North Gulf Coast, mixing with snow there, and some of these colder airs coming in off of Canada, going to bring all of that snow to the Copper River Basin and places in the southern part of the interior. A little bit lighter as we get further to the north in the interior locations, into the Brooks Range as well. North side on the Arctic coast, not going to see any new snowfall, but enough winds up there to start blowing around some of the snow that has been falling in the previous days. And as we move down the west coast of the state, Kotzebue Sound area expecting to see some snow showers. That's going to continue down into the Norton Sound area as well. Not going to see anything in the Kuskokwim Delta down to the Bristol Bay area until this trough starts to push further to the east, bringing in that rain-snow mix back to the southeast. Rain and snow mix for Kodiak Island as well. Some rain out for the Aleutian Islands. Colder as we get further to the west. A rain and snow mix expected out there for Shemya on Thursday. Now, we did have a problem with getting the current temps, so we're going to move ahead to the low temperatures for tonight. We do have temperatures dropping down to the mid-30s throughout the Aleutian Islands, 35 for St. Paul, and then temperatures in the mid-30s for the Bristol Bay area as well, with Dillingham getting down to 34 degrees. Down in the YK Delta, dropping down right to around 30 tonight, with Bethel getting down to 33 degrees. In the Norton Sound area, right around 30 as well, 31 for Nome, expected low tonight. Then as we move out into the Kotzebue Sound area, into the upper 20s there, with Kotzebue getting down to 29 degrees, Shishmaref 29 as well. Then along the Arctic coastline, getting down to the single digits, with Dead Horse dropping all the way down to 1 degree for tonight. As we move into the interior, further out to the east are the lowest temperatures, with Arctic Village down to 5, Fort Yukon down to 4. In the teens for the most part, most locations, and then as we get further to the south, only dropping down into the 20s and 30s there. Anchorage getting down to 32, Homer and Seward both down to 37, Kodiak down to 39 degrees tonight, and then down in the southeast part of the state, low 30s for the most part, Skagway getting down to 27 degrees for tonight. So moving to our highs for tomorrow, upper 30s for the more northerly locations, down along the Gulf Coast, a little bit warmer there into the mid-40s, and as we move along the coastline, 39 degrees for Yakutat high tomorrow, into the upper 30s for the south central, and then as we move up into the more interior locations, into the mid-20s there, single digits, staying pretty cold along the Arctic coast, a lot of cloud cover up there. Only getting up to 7 degrees for Barrow tomorrow, into the mid-30s around the Kotzebue Sound area, mid-30s for the Norton Sound as well. Staying pretty cold along the southwest lower to mid-30s, not much of an improvement of what they're seeing overnight. And then down in the Aleutian Islands, getting up to around 40 degrees, with St. Paul getting up to 39 degrees for a high tomorrow. Taking a look now at our aviation forecast, starting off in the west with that frontal system moving in from the west, we are going to see some widespread MVFR conditions, some locations seeing IFR as well. And then as we move out over mainland part of the state, southwest going to see MVFR conditions with that onshore southwesterly flow. Up along the west coast, going to see with that low pressure moving into that location, we're going to see some IFR conditions mixed in all the way along the Arctic coastline through much of the interior. You're going to see some MVFR and IFR conditions. South central, pretty similar along the Gulf Coast, dropping down to IFR, MVFR conditions for the southeast. Taking a look now at the passes, AKwx should be IFR for tomorrow, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will start off IFR but improve to MVFR throughout the day. Rainy should stay MVFR throughout the day, as well as Windy Pass. Isabel Pass should also remain marginal. As we move into Isabel and Mentasta, both should be MVFR for tomorrow. Tanita Pass is expected to be IFR throughout the day, as well as Portage. And then for Chilkoot and White, both expected to be marginal for tomorrow. Taking a look now at our freezing level, with those low pressures bringing in the warmer air from the south, we can see that extending out over the southeast part of the state, with the freezing line staying to the north of the area, right along the Gulf coastline, and then pushing out up along the west coast of the state, and another tongue of warm air extending in with the front that we have moving in from the west. Taking a look at our icing, with the front out to the west between 6,000 and 12,000 feet there, with the low out over the Norton Sound area between 6,000 and 12,000 feet there, and that's going to extend down into the Bristol Bay area throughout the south central and up into the southern parts of the interior, and then up along the northern part of the state between 7,000 and 13,000 feet there, and down around the Panhandle above 12,000 feet. Taking a look at our jet now, the main part of the jet impacting the state is going to come from a southerly direction over Kodiak, about 135 knots, and then push out to the east out over Canada there. Then as we look out over the Bering Sea, we do have flow out of 125 knots out of a westerly direction, becoming more southerly going into the western part of the Bering, dropping down to around 95 knots. But the main part of the jet staying well to the south, around 170 knots there out of a westerly direction. Taking us down to 9,000 feet, we do have southerly flow throughout much of the Bering Sea, 40 knots getting up to as high as 50 knots, and then exiting out even stronger, around 60 knots there out over northeast Russia. But as we move further off to the east, dropping down to around 30 knots out of a southerly direction over the Alaska Peninsula. And then as we look out over the southwest part of the state, a westerly direction, 20 to 25 knots, getting up to around 30 to 35 knots out over mainland Alaska, and then pushing off further to the east, getting up to as high as 50 knots out over Canada. For the southeast part of the state, westerly direction, 40 to 50 knots there. And then that takes us down to the 3,000 feet winds. We have flow in the southern parts around a westerly direction, 20 knots there for the southeast. Staying pretty similar, 25 knots as we get further to the north, but then picking up quite a bit as we get further into the central parts of the state, westerly direction, 40 knots there. Switching up just off the coastline, an easterly part of the winds there, 40 knots. And then that takes us to the west part of the state. We have a westerly flow, 30 to 40 knots off of the Norton Sound area, and then southwesterly flow, pushing in parts of the eastern Bering Sea around 20 knots there. Out over the remainder of the Bering, getting pretty strong, 40 to 55 knots, the strongest right there over the central Aleutian Islands out of a southerly direction, dropping down pretty quickly to 30 knots as we get out over the northern Bering Sea, then way out west, exiting out over Russia's southeasterly jet, 65 knots there. Taking a look at our turbulence for tomorrow, from the western Aleutian Islands all the way through the eastern Aleutian Islands, with those stronger winds that we were seeing, below 4,000 feet expected for turbulence. And then from the YK Delta area below 4,000 feet there, extending all the way up the coastline into the Point Hope area below 5,000 feet, and then out over much of the northern parts of the interior, dropping down to just north of the Alaska range below 6,000 feet expected turbulence, with the stronger winds that we're going to see in that location as well. And we'll be back shortly with your marine forecast.
Ben, give me a hand.
Unfortunately, many of the old treatments can be dangerous.
Really, we're going, we're all right.
For example, don't rewarm the whole body by putting the victim in a hot shower. A hot shower or tub rewarms the surface of arms and legs. This sends a message to the body that it's okay to open circulation to those cold extremities. Vital warm blood sent from the core rapidly cools as it passes through cold arms and legs. When it gets back to the heart, that shot of cold blood can cause an unusual heartbeat, which results in the heart muscle starting to shiver rather than pump. The patient then has a heart attack. Another old treatment is to give alcohol. It's also dangerous. Like a hot shower, it fools the body into thinking it's warm when it isn't.
Want to give him some coffee?
In fact, any liquid can be dangerous.
No hot liquids.
Because the hypothermia victim is not just cold. He may also be in shock, and you can't give any liquid to a shock victim. He could throw it up, draw the vomit into his lungs, and die from aspiration pneumonia.
Let's be real easy with him.
So, to treat hypothermia safely, be slow and gentle.
How you feeling, Hank?
Don't jar the victim. A hypothermia victim who is being rewarmed should be treated very gently. A sudden jar or shock can also cause an apparent heart attack. It is a fact that even though treatment is progressing, a hypothermia victim's body temperature continues to drop before it starts to rise again. The victim is very vulnerable at this time.
Nice and easy now.
To rewarm a hypothermia victim, use only those treatments that are always safe. The first part of treatment is to take them out of the cold to prevent further heat loss. At this point, the body may not be able to rewarm itself. Blankets will not rewarm a cold body. They only insulate. You need a heat source. First, wrap the cold arms and legs to keep them from rewarming too quickly as you attempt to rewarm the body core of the victim. Then, rewarm the high heat loss areas, the head, neck, armpits, sides, and groin of the victim. The most effective, safe way to rewarm hypothermia victims in the field is to use warm objects and body-to-body rewarming. Warm objects are literally anything that is warm, including warm rocks, lukewarm hot water bottles, warm heating pads, warm packs, or even warm potatoes. But be careful. Be absolutely sure that the objects are not hot. You can burn the victim because of their cold-induced numbness. Hypothermia victims won't be able to tell you if the object is too hot. Check on it yourself, like you would a baby's bath. If it feels uncomfortably warm to you, it's too hot for the victim.
This one, let's get this under his neck. Got a stocking cap ready? Yes. Hold his head up and slide it on. Okay, take it easy. Okay. Hey, Hank, lay your head down nice and easy. Let's see if we can't start warming up his sides. Let's go body to body. Just get your shirt off, right?
Body-to-body rewarming is when one or more warm, healthy people embrace the victim within some insulated shelter such as blankets or a sleeping bag. If this treatment is used, one should continue the treatment for at least an hour.
Okay, just take it easy now. We're going to stay here until you get a little bit warmer, okay?
Oh, man, stay there forever. Wow.
Okay.
These rewarming treatments are safe, slow, and gentle. Don't rush them, and be sure to protect the victim from further cold and from shocks or sudden moves. To safely live and survive in a cold environment, you have to know about hypothermia. Hypothermia is the lowering of body core temperature. It's prevented by having adequate shelter for the body, proper clothing. Recognize hypothermia by the victim's physical symptoms and their exposure to the environmental conditions that cause it. Avoid total rewarming of the body. Do not give any liquids, especially hot liquids or alcohol. It's treated with warm objects or body-to-body rewarming, which is safe, slow, and gentle. Hypothermia is a physical condition. It affects the body. Yet a victim's will to live is often the decisive factor in whether or not they will survive.
Well, I always thought survival was physical. You know, if you was really strong, you could make it. But for some reason, I just said to myself, oh, heck, I'm breathing, I'm alive, I'm going to stay with it as long as I can. I did have a lot of water in my suit, and I already had hypothermia before I hit the beach. And mainly, it was really hard because I couldn't swim. I didn't have no goal. It was just lay back in the water for the night and see where I was in the daytime. And of course, I didn't know if I'd be near land or not. I was hoping I would be. And well, it just got to be a battle with myself on thinking of the positive things.
It's a fact that people with mild cases of hypothermia have apparently given up and died, while others have survived under conditions we'd never believed possible. To know what it is, know how to prevent it, how to recognize it, and how to treat it. When was the last time you shivered from the cold?
Don't take your eye off of him!
Hypothermia is the lowering of the body core temperature. The best prevention for hypothermia is to stay dry.
Get those clothes off him!
It makes good sense to treat him for hypothermia.
Give me a hand.
Many of the old treatments can be dangerous.
Go on, we're all right.
Don't rewarm the whole body by putting the victim in a hot shower.
Want to give him some coffee?
You can't give any liquid to a shock victim.
How you feeling, Hank?
Be slow and gentle.
Nice and easy now.
Blankets will not rewarm a cold body. You need a heat source. Lukewarm hot water bottles, warm heating pads, warm packs, or even warm potatoes.
Okay, just take it easy now. We're going to stay here until you get a little bit warmer, okay?
Oh, man, stay there forever. Wow.
Okay.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look at the ice edge to start things off. Ice dipping down now into places of Bristol Bay area there near Dillingham, but for the most part all along the west coast up into the Norton Sound area, we are seeing some of the ice along the coastline start to melt and drift away off to the west and northwest. Also in the Cook Inlet area, some of that ice is starting to melt as well with those warmer temperatures that we've been seeing around Cook Inlet. Now we'll take a look down in the southeast for the Marines. In the inside waters, we have southeasterly flow, 15 to 20 knots there. A more westerly flow as we get out into the Gulf, 15 to 20 knots there as well. A little bit lower as we get closer towards the Yakutat, 10 knots there. Seas anywhere from 9 to 11 feet out in the Gulf, and then 4 to 3 feet as we get into the inside waters. On Thursday, southeasterly flow 30 knots in the inside waters until we get up further to the northerly flow there, 25 knots. Southerly flow out over much of the Gulf, 30 to 35 knots, and then closer towards the Yakutat, northeasterly flow, 15 knots there. Seas getting up to as high as 15 feet. For the south central now on tomorrow, southwesterly flow almost throughout the whole area, 20 to 25 knots. Out in the Gulf, 12 to 13 feet, a little bit lower as we get further off to the west. We have seas from 7 to 9 feet there and 3 feet in Prince William Sound. Then on Thursday, flow becoming more northwesterly. Up in Cook Inlet, 10 to 20 knots, getting stronger closer towards Shelikof Strait in the Barren Islands, 25 to 30 knots there. And then 15 knots out of the north as we get into Prince William Sound. Seas anywhere from 6 to 8 feet out in the Gulf. As we move out over towards the Alaska Peninsula, southwesterly flow, 15 knots on the Bering side, 20 to 25 knots on the Pacific side. Seas there 10 to 12 feet, 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side. Then on Thursday, flow becoming more northwesterly as we get further off to the east, 10 to 25 knots there, strongest on the Pacific side, and then a southwesterly flow, 15 to 20 knots as we get closer towards the King Cove and Cold Bay areas. As we look out over the Aleutian Islands, southerly and southeasterly flow out there, weaker as we get further off towards the east, 25 knots, getting up to as high as 45 knots as we push out into the central Aleutian Islands. Western Aleutian Islands, southerly flow 40 knots there with seas as high as 29 feet, going all the way down to 6 to 9 feet as we get out towards the eastern Aleutian Islands. Then on Thursday, staying out in the eastern Aleutian Islands, southerly flow 20 to 25 knot there, seas from 12 to 17 feet as we get closer towards the central Aleutian Islands, flow becoming a little bit more southwesterly there, 15 to 20 knots, and then out over the western Aleutian Islands, southerly flow 40 knots with seas getting up to as high as 18 feet on Thursday. along the west coast of the state, starting off St. Matthew Island area, southerly flow 35 knots there. That's 35 knots becoming more southwesterly as we get closer towards the Bering Strait with some freezing spray up there as well. Dropping down to around 15 feet on the southern side of Nunavik Island southwesterly. And then we have by the Pribilofs, southerly flow 25 knots there with seas as high as 7 feet. Highest seas up closer towards the Gamble area up to as high as 10 feet on Wednesday. So we move into Thursday, flow becoming southerly southeasterly as we get further to the north, 15 to 20 knots along the coast as we get out further out of a southeasterly direction, 25 knots closer to St. Matthew Island. And by the Pribilofs, southerly flow 30 knots there. Along the Arctic coast, we have primarily an easterly flow that is going from 40 to 45 knots until we get out towards the Point Hope area. Southeasterly flow around 20 knots there on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we have southerly flow out west, 15 knots. Stronger as we get along the Arctic coastline. All easterly flow there, 25 to 30 knots on Thursday. Quick recap out over the state. A lot of rain and snow mix along the west coast down into the Aleutian Islands. But as we get further inland, starting to see a possibility of some light freezing rain there, becoming more snow as we get all the way out to the east and blowing snow along the Arctic coastline. A little bit more rain as we get along the Gulf Coast, and that's going to extend into the Panhandle as well. But some snow mixed in as we get further to the north around Skagway and Juneau areas. Then for Wednesday, we have that all becoming rain in the southeast, rain along the Gulf Coast becoming mixed with snow, Kenai Peninsula, and then snow throughout much of the interior out along the west and southwest parts of the state. Some areas of isolated freezing rain we are going to have in the Kotzebue Sound area, upper Yukon Delta, but all the way along the Arctic coast, snow with areas of blowing snow all throughout the areas up there. Then we're going to see some rain and mixing with snow along the Aleutian Islands. Thank you for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.